I spent 3 years on a degree to figure out it wasn't the right choice for me. If you're about to choose yours, I hope you won't make the same mistakes I did. A little bit about myself. I studied a Bachelor of Science, majoring in Neuroscience and Psychology, and I've just graduated from the University of Sydney. When I picked my major, it was just purely out of an interest to learn about how the brain works. And I think most of us walk into university asking the same question. Which subject gets me closer to the thing I'm curious about? Before we settle on a degree, we're usually drawn by a particular kind of question. Maybe it's to do with understanding the behavioral incentives of human beings, or understanding why humans make foolish decisions. It could be asking why people procrastinate, how come babies don't have memories. These are the kinds of questions that can easily feel like sensible grounds for choosing your major. But here's the part where most people miss out on. When we focus only on looking at what the major will equip us with and neglect what you'll be doing on a day-to-day basis, there could be huge discrepancies between your expectations versus reality, and it's worth conducting a thorough research before you make your decision. Take psychology as an example. You don't actually spend most of your week working with people and understanding human behaviors that way. Most of your time is spent looking at research papers, reading their methodology, as well as just coming up with your own experimental setup and writing heaps of research reports. First year, you do get a glance over the overall mind map for the field, and it's really interesting to see how your professors are breaking down these experiments. But beyond that, as you begin to specialize, you will dig deeper into the statistical models and spend more and more time on those. The same goes for neuroscience. Being interested in the neuromechanisms behind your behavior can be quite different from the kind of interest that allows you to commit to long, focused hours picking apart the minute details of those mechanisms. I think the most important thing when considering your major isn't just evaluating how closely it lines up with your interest, but also whether it's the right method that you've chosen to get to explore this major a bit more, and whose tedium can you actually put up with. Let's just say you wanted to explore the brain sciences. You have the option of becoming a neurosurgeon, a neuroscientist, a psychologist, a clinical psychologist, and computational neuroscientist, an engineer. The list just goes on. For people who go on to become surgeons, let's just say, they commit to the long road of becoming doctors because they've chosen to get to know the brain through operations or just through the sheer number of patients that they see and all the histories that they carry. You have to ask yourself, will you be interested to get to know the brain that way? Do you actually want to work with patients? Do you care? If clinical depression is your thing, you might become a registered psychologist, study CBT, and really get to know the ins and outs of those systems. But you also have to understand what that road costs. Can you actually withstand the repetitiveness that runs through all scientific work? The abyss of a question that just won't resolve, or results that just never quite land in a form that you can publish? If this doesn't sound like the kind of tasks you want to be engaged in on a daily basis, then it's probably not the right path for you. And it would be really difficult for you to become a pioneer in this field because you're not thinking about it day and night. Then how can you expect yourself to become exceptional in this field profession? When we commence our studies at bachelor's level, we usually begin by exploring the overall map, then specialize and micro-specialize. And this is where two types of students split apart. Some people will find the narrowing extremely unbearably dull. And I'm this type of student. If for the next 5 years of my life, all I'm going to do is just study the functions of one specific neurotransmitter, I'm going to bore myself to death. But you also have, on the other side, some other students who are really fascinated by this ability to break down such complicated things and being able to study it using the scientific method. I've had a friend back in my neuropharmacology tutorial where I've seen the fervor she's put forth into her studies. It's just nothing I can compare to. During a group activity in our pharmacology tutorial, we had to research limitations in our current experimental setup. And when everyone was just beginning to research into this topic, she's already pulled up her computer, opened it, and we see this long list of research papers she's already read in her spare time with extensive notes, and immediately she's kind of on the whiteboard mind mapping the entire backbone for the structure of how we're going to answer it. Even after our 4-hour tutorial had ended, she would go speak to the professor because she genuinely cared about changing the scientific practice for the benefit of women. She was arguing, for example, that studies should use more female rats, and she had a long discussion with the professor, coming up with heaps of reasons about why we should do so. And when I had a talk with her, she gave me this recommendation about a podcast from The Diary of a CEO. The episode was with the hormone and fertility experts about how women have been misled about their own health. Looking back now, nearly all of my friends and even acquaintances who went on to honours had one thing in common. During any random conversation, they'd just start talking about a paper they'd finished recently, the interesting thing that researchers did with the mice, and so on. Everyone was drawn to something different, but there was always at least one question they'd decided to explore. For one person, it might be a specific mental health condition. For another, a neurodegenerative disease like Parkinson's. They were always the ones voluntarily seeking out projects, consistently taking on research scholarships, or volunteering. My developmental psych friends were volunteering at early intervention centers, working with kids with developmental conditions. My neuroscience friends were volunteering in labs. None of this was really contributing to their high distinction. It was just pure interest, usually something personal to them. And they had this drive to make a real difference one day. Most importantly, I think they were happy to go narrow, to spend a lot of time digging into one small, narrowly defined problem. Nassim Nicholas Taleb said something similar in Fooled by Randomness about the difference between the people who abandon scientific study and the ones who stick with it. Particularly thoughtful are those who had to abandon scientific studies because of their inability to keep focused on a narrowly defined problem. The minute arcane details and petty arguments. Without excessive intellectual curiosity, it is almost impossible to complete a PhD thesis these days. But without a desire to narrowly specialize, it is impossible to make a scientific career. I couldn't agree more. Like I touched on earlier, the thing to avoid when deciding on your profession is only looking at the glamorous front of it and neglecting the grueling tasks that you'll be engaged in on a daily basis. So here's what I do to check that before you commit. It doesn't matter whether you're a first, second, or third year student. Just go and sit in on the PhD level research seminars your uni runs. You're not there for the content. You're there to watch the kind of work you'd actually be doing for the rest of your career. You might even catch your own professor presenting at a conference and then see the other half of their life, the research that runs alongside all the teaching, and the questions that they'll spend years turning over. So you ask yourself, honestly, after a seminar like that, would you actually go home and open a couple of papers and bring them up with your professor in the next lecture? Because if you're not already thinking about this stuff in your free time, I don't rate your chances of making real money from it. You're just not leveraging any unfair advantage. You've got to find your talent, push it towards depth, and let that edge carry you higher. Another quick way to get to know a profession is to grab coffee with someone and have a one-to-one discussion to ask for their authentic opinion about the competitiveness of this profession, how demanding it is, as well as the growth trajectory. You can't expect them to give you unguarded opinions over a group setting where you have other spectators also watching. So just have one-on-one, deep discussion, ask any questions that you have. I think they will largely be happy to just share their real opinion about the uni, about this profession, about the pay, etc. As a general piece of advice, unless you've done a lot of research and you know exactly what you're getting into, don't lock yourself into one profession too quickly. Stay open to other possibilities and plan ahead for your degree. When it comes to choosing electives, although I've said I dislike how science forces you to micro-specialize as you go down and pursue further education, it's still really worth your time when you study one unit learning about the scientific method. So any units, whether that's from psychology or from biology, that allows you to learn the method, it's worth your time. Then, for any spare electives, use it on units that helps you build highly transferable fundamentals. This could be logic from philosophy or any other degree course. These are really usually more in depth than language units, and so, you get to learn other professions all the way through your degree before you're fully locked in a specific path, like research. Don't skip over certain internships that's got nothing to do with your discipline. because trialing different internships is actually one of the most effective ways to figure out the right career for you. As for international students, don't optimize for going home during your summer or winter breaks. Use that time to lock in and find an internship, because if you just go home every summer break, then you're setting yourself up for a lot of trouble after graduation. These are just some of my personal takeaways. I hope at least one of the tips will be useful to you. And if you're in uni wondering in this age of AI whether it's still necessary to give it my best for my studies, I think so. I always get reminded from this quote from a psychologist, B.F. Skinner. He says, "Education is everything that survives after what you've learned has been forgotten." We seem to have this misconception about an education only proving itself useful if we manage to remember most of its content. I don't think it's always the case. The mere fact that you've gone through that entire thinking process, reaching a particular conclusion, and seen the limitations throughout, has already transformed the way you think. You can call it a paradigm shift if you're coming across something you've never thought of before from a really unique lens. It's quietly rewired the way you think, rewire your brain, as well as updating certain mental models that you have. And so give it your all, at least 80% effort for your uni degree. If you enjoyed this video, please give me a thumbs up. I would greatly appreciate your encouragement.